Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, our last Shabbat of 2020. And as I said earlier, that it's this Shabbat when Joseph not only reunites with his father and fully with all of his brothers, but they end up settling in the land of Egypt, and he ends up executing his plan, these dreams that he interpreted of Pharaoh, that he had for 7 years been collecting all this food, and we're 2 years into those 7 years of famine with 5 years left. And when Joseph tells Pharaoh, this is his father, these are his brothers, he is given the best property in all of Egypt. We read in Genesis chapter 47, V'yoshev Yosef et aviv v'et echav v'yiten lachem achuzah be'eretz Mitzrayim b'meitav ha'aretz. That he settles his father and his brothers in Egypt, giving them the best part of the land. And then Vayichalkel Yosef et aviv v'et echav, that he sustains his father, he sustains his brothers. V'et kol beit aviv lechem lefi hataf. And he gives actually his extended family, his whole household, all the bread that they could ever want, even down to the youngest child in his family. Beautiful. It's like happily ever after. Joseph saved the day. He sets up this food pantry to give to everybody, but actually that's not what happens. He gives out that bread to all who are hungry as long as they're his family. He helps out those closest to him. But what ends up happening to those who end up being the most vulnerable in Egypt during this economic recession? He ignores them. And when the money gave out in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came back to Joseph and they said to him, Hava lanu lechem velama namut nigdecha ki efes kasef. Please give us bread. We'll die. And all of our money is gone. We have no way to pay for it. And so what does Joseph say in this holiday season? Not the most charitable of people. He says, fine, you have no money. Give me your livestock. What happens then when they come to him and their livestock is gone? And he says, okay, I gave you bread. You gave me your horses. You gave me your sheep. You gave me your cattle. You gave me your donkeys. They came to him and said, we cannot hide anymore. We have no more animals. We have no more money. So he asked for their land. And they gave up their land just to survive. And then when they came to him again, they were hungry and had no more land. They had nothing else to give. They gave up themselves. And Joseph set up the system of indentured servitude in Egypt. He had the potential to help everyone. It was in his power, in his control, and he actively chose. This is the part that we don't talk about. This never makes it into Act 2 of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical. He actively chose to prey on the most vulnerable in society. Not simply to provide for those in need because everybody was in need, but he had what everybody needed and took advantage of the little that they had, so that even by giving them food, even by giving them limited assistance, he was actually hurting them in the long run. In an attempt to stay in the headlines, I'd call it that and nothing else, President Trump has suggested several times that he may not sign the most recent stimulus bill that was passed by the House and the Senate. In May, the House of Representatives passed a $3 trillion stimulus bill. As early as October, as recent as October, right before the election, the president was pushing a $2 trillion stimulus bill. And even so, the only bill that could pass in this divided legislative body was a $900 billion stimulus bill, which for us seems like a lot, but is actually quite little. And still, the president may veto it because there's a debate among him and senators and congressional representatives about how much money the average American should receive in stimulus checks. Those members of Congress who have been getting paid throughout this pandemic, those members of Congress who were first to receive vaccination after refusing to wear masks, after having super spreader events in federal buildings and facilities, after denying the seriousness of this disease, of this pandemic, they jumped the line before healthcare professionals to get vaccinated. They who, some of them, have sold stocks and invested in businesses that they knew would do well because of this pandemic, sold off those businesses before the public knew that they knew would hurt. And they're arguing over $600 per person or $2,000, which is a lot and really nothing at all. Because you see, if this most recent stimulus bill does not become law, a lot of people are going to be homeless. And a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. More than 12 million Americans who have been laid off could lose their unemployment benefits. A historic part of the CARES Act that was passed the early part of 2020 was 3 separate programs for out-of-work Americans. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program allowed independent contractors, self-employed workers to qualify for unemployment payments who usually do not get to qualify. Those who could not work because family members were ill, or they were quarantining, or the children's schools were closed, they were able to qualify for unemployment. And also when Congress passed the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program, it provided an additional 13 weeks of federally paid benefits to those whose state unemployment benefits ran out after the typical 26 weeks. If those 2 programs lapse because this bill does not become law, then more than 12 million Americans will lose benefits, will not know if they'll be able to put food on their table in the coming days or weeks for their children. Additionally, the CDC actually put a prevention order in effect in September that halted evictions through the end of the year. But the order doesn't cancel rent. It doesn't freeze rent. So all tenants' back rent will be due the first of the year in less than a week if this moratorium expires, if this new stimulus bill is not passed. And without that, an estimated 9.2 million renters who lost employment income, who owe back rent, will be evicted, will not have a place to go, in addition to not necessarily having food on their tables. And to top it off, the stimulus bill is combined with the spending bill. So beginning Tuesday, essential workers of the federal government will begin to be furloughed if this is not signed into law. I bring this all up because I think it's important to remember when so many in our country are deciding about the economic future and stability of the everyday American. And it's really those who have that are deciding about whether they should throw breadcrumbs to those who have not. We don't know what to do with this fact that Joseph was so comfortable taking advantage of the Egyptians all around him. Maybe it was that being viceroy of Egypt, being second in command, got to his head, that he was this humble guy who was a servant, who almost died, who was in jail, and power went to his head. Maybe it's that he was trying to protect himself and his family so that he never returned to the bottom of the totem pole. But this, in some ways, is the system that we're stuck in right now. A system in which those with power to decide the distribution of wealth in times of not the everyday, not when all is well and good, but at times of economic recession, at times of crisis, be it a 7-year famine in the land, or be it a once in a century, a once in a lifetime pandemic. And they look out for themselves and prey on the most vulnerable. I hope and pray that this is signed into law. And the truth is, the $900 billion stimulus bill is barely enough. We thought over the summer that the economy was recovering, and then in the fall, we've seen spike after spike of this virus, and the economy is hurting again for many of us. What will happen is anybody's guess. But I'll tell you, we often ask, how is it that Joseph's descendants became slaves in Egypt and nobody stood up for them? Nobody fought for them. It's because there was nobody left to fight for them. They had taken advantage of the most vulnerable in society when they had everything and everybody else had nothing, made them indentured servants, made them slaves themselves. And so when they were in need, there was nobody to turn to ask for a handout because they had taken away everything from everyone. We turn to others in need in hopes that if we were fortunate to give, we would give to those in need. And if we were in need, they would give to us. That is what our faith demands. That is the essence of Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, of love your neighbor as yourself, that we provide for them in the same way that we hope and pray they would provide for us. We don't take advantage of others. Our Torah demands that we actually make sure the most vulnerable in society that the Torah defines as the immigrant, as the orphan, as the widow, that we do not take advantage of the most vulnerable. Joseph does exactly that. The Senate is doing that. The president was doing that. What comes next is anybody's guess. And even if we see the light at the end of the tunnel, even if our friends and neighbors and loved ones are beginning to be vaccinated, the economic challenges that we face will linger for a lot longer than this virus will. Even when we are healthy, many of us will still struggle to put food on our tables, to pay our rent, to pay our mortgage, to pay our car payment. We shouldn't have to give up our livestock, our land, ourselves, our freedom, just to make ends meet. We often learn from Torah, but we also learn from Torah's mistakes. We're stuck in the same situation that Egypt was stuck in. And I fear that those making decisions are Joseph, not looking out for us and only looking out for themselves. May 2021 be a new year of light and bring a time when all of our dreams are fulfilled, not just the dreams of the few in power and in control. Shabbat Shalom.